Welcome to Plot Twist, the show where we unpack the unexpected turns that shape our careers, relationships, and ourselves. I'm your host, Tiana, leader, speaker, and corporate mom. And I'm sitting down with guests that prove that growth begins often at the twist of a story. Let's dive in. Hey, y'all. Today's episode's a little different. There's no guest today, just me, a mic, and a moment to pause. So I recently had a birthday, and birthdays have like this funny way of forcing reflection. Not the kind that you schedule, just the kind that just shows up. You wake up, stare at the ceiling, and like, oh my gosh, well, it doesn't matter how old I am. But the point is, you naturally fall into this moment of reflection. And when I look back at this year, I'm like, whew, it's been full of twists and turns and more than a few plot twists of its own. Starting this podcast, taking on new projects, letting go of some things that I thought were going to last longer, and saying yes to things that I didn't even see coming. This episode isn't about wrapping up neatly. It's about acknowledging the in-between, the space between who you were and who you're becoming. Not every chapter starts with clarity. A lot of them just start with a little bit of courage. So let's talk about the beginning of this year. The beginning of this year, I had some plans. I do like a little cutesy vision board. I stick things on the wall that I'm inspired by, that I want to do. And I'll say, cute, I want to be able to get this car or do more public speaking, stuff like that. And then things accelerated faster than I expected. I had a layoff in April, and some other things kind of stalled out. I had to pause and plan. So some doors did close quietly, no drama, no explanation, just, hey, thank you so much for your time here. It's time to move on to something else. And some popped up as soon as that door closed, like, hey, would you be interested in doing a children's book? But here's what I learned overall. Growth doesn't always look like momentum. Sometimes it can look like a recalibration where you pause and say, okay, now this changed. How do we rebalance? And we don't really talk enough about how disorienting growth can feel, how success can come with grief, how leveling up sometimes means that you're sitting in uncertainty longer than what you wanted to. I decided that I was going to take the summer to spend a lot more time with the kids. I did take on some projects, but in taking that time over the summer, I kind of thought, okay, soon as summer's over, as soon as August hits, like boom, my inbox is going to be blowing back up again. And it didn't blow up the way that I thought it was going to. So, just planning for those unexpected moments. Growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it is silent, it's uncomfortable, and it's deeply necessary. Like, there's a reason why things happen the way they do. There's a reason why certain doors don't open up fully the way that they do. So let's talk about, this podcast a little bit more in depth, like why I started this plot twist. So I started this podcast because I really wanted to figure out different ways to get myself out there. I was tired of like the linear success stories, the ones where you say, I did A, then B, then C, and here I am. But real life doesn't really happen that way. They don't move in straight lines. And this podcast was never meant to be about perfection. It's about the pivot. It's about learning about other people's pivots, for myself to learn and potentially be inspired by them, by sharing those inspirational moments with other people, by getting my voice out there. I want to do more in public speaking. And if you have taken that journey towards public speaking, you know that it can be very competitive to try to get spots on the main stage. So you have to showcase how well you speak and how well you engage with other people. And so this podcast was also a win for me to be able to put myself out there on a platform, show a sample of, how do I interact with others? So honestly, starting this podcast while juggling everything else in my life felt like a risk, because shouldn't I be using this to get something that's a little bit more solid monetarily? But it really felt honest, and it felt like a really fun journey to take on. So I felt like at the end of the day, worst case, Like one of my guests, Mary Margaret, which you'll hear her podcast episode really soon. If nobody else shows up to this event but me and 3 people, if it's just my mom, my boyfriend, and myself, at least, we all came together and we're gonna have a great dinner. So to me, if no one else listens to this episode, at least I got a chance to talk and it's gonna feel good. The story makes sense later in life. It doesn't make sense when you're living it. So I'm hoping that this is a moment where I pause back and reflect once again on the journey that I had. Diving more into like the power of reflection, reflection isn't about dwelling. It's really about noticing, about being self aware, noticing what drains you up this year, noticing what lit you up, noticing what you kept pushing off out of bad habit or out of any kind of habit. Doesn't necessarily have to be a bad one, but it really wasn't aligned to whatever you were doing. And so as we're moving through the holiday season, everything gets louder, more noise, more expectations, more pressure to finish strong, to do the holidays like everybody else does. But I want to offer a different invitation. What if you finished aware instead of hitting that expectation mark? You don't need a new year to become someone new, just the courage to tell yourself the truth. I don't like my family, for example. I don't want to spend Thanksgiving or Christmas with them. I don't see the value in buying all these gifts just because it's Hanukkah or it's Kwanzaa. I like to show my appreciation for others throughout the year. What's wrong with saying that and owning that and feeling comfortable in that? And that's your truth. So here's my ask to all of you. Before the year ends, I want you to sit down with 3 questions. First one, what worked this year? Even if it didn't look like how you imagined, if you take a step back, did you actually get an outcome out of something that you tried? Second one, number 2, what are you carrying into this new year out of obligation instead of intention? If I had to break that down a little bit further, are you on a job because that's the job that you have, or is that the job you want? Are you in a relationship with someone because, hey, they've been here for me all this time, they should stay around? Or is it that I'm intentionally wanting to build something with this person? This person brings me joy. And number 3, if next year had a title, what would you want it to be? Yes, it could be a segue to plot twist, our plot twist titles. And this isn't about setting goals. It's not about checklists. It's about helping to create your vision, because goals can change, but your vision will anchor you when your plot twist comes. As I've gone down the journey of wanting to do a social media content creation, I've had different offers come up, whether it's, hey, will you endorse this product? Or, hey, would you like to speak at XYZ? And there have been a few things that I've turned down because when I looked at what that overall vision is and what that purpose is, it doesn't serve me as well. It doesn't match my brand. And sometimes a job can be a job, money can be money, but at what cost? So you have to figure out what your vision is and what your brand is, so that way you're anchored when those opportunities come up. Clarity doesn't come from control, it comes from reflection and knowing where you are. So, if this year taught me anything, it's this: you don't have to have it all figured out to move forward. You just have to be willing to pause long enough to listen. This podcast is still unfolding. This is episode 3. So I am still unfolding. You are still unfolding too. And that is a beautiful thing. And if this season of life feels like the messy middle, that's where some of the best chapters can be written. Thanks for tuning into Plot Twist. If this story made you pause, reflect, or smile, please share it with someone who's in the middle of their own plot twist. You can catch more episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and connect with me on my socials. Until next time, keep writing your own story.